All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About It. Obviously, the subject needs really no introduction. You can see it right there in the top right. And we're talking about CLG possibly being removed from the league. Obviously, this is not like an announcement that's been made or anything like that. This is kind of speculation. And really something that I want to bring up as a topic for discussion given their results, which have not been good not only this season, but the last several seasons. And how the org has, in appearances, been in a steady state of decline, both with their interaction with their own players and with their standings in the league as the years have kind of gone on. This is something that I think a lot of people maybe don't necessarily want to talk about for whatever reason. I think it's difficult to bring up any conversation where you say that one of the legendary orgs of of a region, like LCS, where you consider any discussion where that organization might get removed. But I think that given the current state of CLG and obviously their results in the regular season this year, that it's something that needs to be strongly discussed for a variety of reasons. I'm going to talk about why maybe keeping them would be a good idea, but obviously my argument for this one is that CLG does need to go. And I'm going to start that by listing the results. That's I think the best way to kind of go about this, because the results are these concrete factors that you can't argue with, right? You can't magically wave a wand and those results get better. And there's really not a whole lot of context to provide for those results. It is what it is. People say, oh well, that year they were missing a player, or that year they didn't have necessarily a good roster, or that year this or that or whatever. It's like, it doesn't matter, because everyone else is playing under the same conditions. So any self-inflicted stuff that the team may have gone through has no bearing on the results, to be honest with you. So I'm going to start really from the beginning of their results with the league, and then kind of include their international stuff as well. I think some of the IEM stuff can kind of be left out because that wasn't really Riot stuff. So looking at pretty much entirely Riot-sponsored events here. Right, that's all it is. So in 2013, they got 5th and 6th in spring and summer, respectively. Nothing much doing there. In 2014, 3rd and 6th, respectively, for spring and summer. No Worlds qualification. 2015, they had 5th in the spring, 1st in the summer. I believe it was when they got Doublelift, so I'm putting an asterisk next to those championships that they won with Doublelift, because Doublelift was a very large part of why they won it. And there will be maybe a separate video on that at some point. There are already videos kind of explaining how CLG won those championships with him, but I'm not going to launch into that right now. Just know that going forward for me, there's an asterisk on it, because they had one of the best, if not the best, ADC that North America's ever seen. And then 2015, after they qualify 1st in summer, they go to Worlds. They get 12th to 15th. Not a great showing. They come back the next year, 1st in spring. They go to MSI. They lose against SKT 3-0, but no shade to be thrown there. SKT was a really good team. The list of teams that could have even contested them was very small, and CLG certainly wasn't on that list. So no shame in losing to SKT and the MSI. And then they come back after MSI. They get 4th in summer. I think a little bit of MSI burnout that kind of happens when teams sort of come back from that. So they get 4th in summer. They do manage to qualify for Worlds. They get 9th through 12th, so slightly better results from the previous year. And then that's sort of it. There's really not a whole lot else to write in the book of CLG in terms of things that they did, or successes that they've had, because in summer they got 5th and 6th. And then spring they got 3rd. I don't know why those results are mixed up on my list. They managed to qualify 2nd in the LCS finals, but they did not qualify for Worlds in that year. The next year in 2018, they have 7th and 8th in spring and summer, respectively. Nothing going on there. No Worlds qualification. You don't get to Worlds if you're qualifying 7th and 8th in your regular season. In 2019, in spring, they had 7th through 8th, so they qualified 7th through 8th in spring. In 2019, they qualified 3rd in summer. They make it to the LCS finals in 3rd place, but they, again, don't qualify for Worlds. So, again, we're having some very mixed results in this time period. It's like sometimes they look okay, and then sometimes they're like hot garbage. And then, I mean, the rest is really history from there. The results have been abysmal since then. 2020, 10th and 9th in spring and summer, respectively. Didn't qualify for anything. I think they were hoping maybe they were going to rebuild the next year. And then they come back this year. They get 9th and 10th in the lock-in, 9th through 10th in the lock-in. And then they get 9th in spring and 10th in summer. I'm not really sure what else you want to say about those results. They've had some good moments, but those moments are in the past, and they are certainly prior to the actual LCS founding. So their NALCS results are a little bit different than the LCS because those two organizations were run kind of differently. I think there's a lot of contrast to be made between those two organizations right now. I see that as a cat in the room. Hold on a second. So, anyways, what I'm trying to bring up here is that CLG's success has been varied in intensity, and there is more red than green in the ledger of CLG. And I think that largely speaking, the league is not improved by CLG being there, just quite simply. I think that CLG is kind of largely considered to be a team where people can get free wins. I think that they're largely considered a team that is not particularly competitive. And I think that a lot of people would be very nervous even if CLG were able to qualify for any kind of international event or if they made playoffs, which they didn't. Even in an expanded format where more teams can make the playoffs this split, they did not make playoffs. There are, 8 teams? I think there are 8 teams total in the playoffs right now, and CLG is not one of them. Normally you don't ever get that many teams in a playoff, but they're not there. And in a season where they had a triple round robin, so they had plenty of opportunities to win games and just didn't. And I think that especially when you kind of consider some of the fat stuff that they've been doing recently, where their kind of management of player situations and not really being smart with public relations stuff and kind of showing that they will sort of axe their players for, really kind of anything, and then post publicly that if they don't win, they're not going to play. It's very toxic, and that's not good. And I know that to some degree, as professional players and as organizations, there should be some level of tolerance because competitive org and you're trying to win games and stuff like that, and so to some degree there's going to be this sort of competitive mechanismo or whatever you want to call it that is just going to happen. But there's a difference between that and then posting team business that should never have been recorded in the first place, and posting that online and then being very surprised like when the reaction from the community is that was disgusting. They had a literal playbook from Cloud9 on what not to do. They literally did Cloud9 again, but with the knowledge that you shouldn't do that, which I think is maybe something that Cloud9 necessarily didn't know, although common sense and logic would say, hey, don't do that. I think that maybe you can give Cloud9 a little bit of the benefit. It was still disgusting, but the fact that CLG did it, having a prime example of do not do it, this will happen to you, and they did it anyways, I think is problematic. Really, the biggest arguments I think for CLG, besides kind of the intangible stuff with the way they handle players, though, is really that they don't make the league better. Right? If you don't have a team that is, that phrase that iron sharpeneth iron, well, CLG is like, is like putty. They're clay. They're not, they're not sharpening anything. They're kind of just being smashed against the wall or whatever, or whatever you happen to want to hit them with throughout the regular season. They're just not competitive anymore. And this is the second season in a row where they have finished 9th and 10th. Respectively between each part of the season. And if this were relegation, they would have been out last year because there would have been another team that would have had the opportunity to take them out and take their spot. But because of franchising, that's not the case. Now, that being said, I think from my understanding, CLG is up to be reviewed on whether or not the league will continue to move forward with them. And if you're the commissioner or the committee, or whoever has any kind of control over that, and you're looking at CLG, I think you're making a very strong consideration to remove CLG from the league. And the reason for that is because you want the best level of competition you get. You want the highest level of competition with an organization that fosters the best talent and the best means to win. And right now, that is not CLG. CLG is not an organization that is going to make the league better if it continues to be here. It's just how I see it. Other people are going to get mad, even CLG fans. Oh, well, our org's been around for so long, and you got to give them chances and stuff like that. It's like, well, how many chances do you give them? They've had 2 years. Golden Guardians got better in 2 years. That org's in playoffs now. Immortals, they got better. They've shown improved results. And then you look at the upper end of the table, the teams that are still at the top, with varying degrees of success right now between 100 Thieves, TSM, Team Liquid, and Cloud9. they may not necessarily be 100% as good as they could be from year to year, but they're always like in that top end of the bracket, right? They're always that upper end of the standings. So they never really drop very far. Then you kind of have your middling pack. You have Dignitas, you have Evil Geniuses, and now Immortals and Golden Guardians being added to that mix where those teams are becoming more competitive. They had time. They showed that they can do it. So, why can't CLG? With an organization that's supposed to be as well funded as it is and have as much experience and talent as it does, it seems kind of shocking to me that they are still in the bottom end of the bracket and that their standings and their results are abysmal. If that's the case, then that shows to me is a CLG's lack of commitment to be able to make those improvements. And it's not like they didn't try, right? I think, bringing Broxa was a good idea. I think changing the way the roster worked was a good idea. I think, bringing in the kind of coaches that they have right now in order to change the game style or their play style was big as well, but it didn't work. So if you're making all those changes and your organization is still not getting better, and this is the second year in a row, this 4 splits, that you aren't going to an LCS finals or even going to playoffs, really. You're not going to playoffs. You haven't qualified for an international event in 2 years. And you're fixing to go through a massive rebuilding phase, or potentially you would. I'm not really sure what else you want me to say about that. It's not looking good for you. It might be time for you to hang it up, and a lot of fans are not going to be happy about that if that does happen. CLG is one of the longest lasting organizations within the LCS. It's been around since kind of the start of everything. It's had a lot of different coaches, had a lot of different players. It's had success to some degree, but it's just not an organization that makes the league better. I think one of the biggest arguments that you can make for keeping it, because I said that I would give them the benefit of the doubt to make that argument, is that they are a legacy team, right? And they've been around for so long that maybe they do deserve to hold that spot maybe one more season by dint of just being CLG. We've been here long. Hey, we've made an investment. We've been here for a long time. You should give us the benefit of the doubt at least one more time, one more season. Give us a chance to really, get things done. And, this is a do or die. And if we don't do it, then you can remove us. I think maybe you can make that argument, but, what guarantee do you have that they will make a turnaround in this next season? No, you don't. And if they don't, the league will continue to worsen by a bad team being in it. And it's not to say that other teams don't have problems either. It's not to say that other teams aren't necessarily bad or that maybe they're not as good as they could be. There's room for improvement everywhere, right? There are still some orgs that are, that kind of need to be put under, the microscope lens and say, hey, you got to fix some stuff or, you're going to be in trouble in the next couple of years. But CLG is the biggest sore thumb when it comes to that because they're an org that's been around for as long as they have, and they haven't improved over the last 2 years like they should. And that's a long time, guys. 2 years in League of Legends is a long time. It's 4 splits. There are a lot of teams that have come and gone in other leagues that are no longer here in 4 splits. So I think that's really kind of the end, I guess, of my rant or my discussion with this one, right? The biggest thing that I wanted to just kind of talk about was why CLG needs to go. And I know that it's a team that a lot of people are passionate about and passionate in supporting and that it has a lot of fans, but I have to imagine that those fans are probably frustrated with yet another year of poor results. And, I imagine that a lot of people would like to see that spot that CLG occupies maybe given over to another organization that is more competitive, more driven to win, and maybe has a different outlook on things. The fact of the matter is opening that CLG spot up to another team could be a fantastic thing, right? You could bring new blood, new life into the into the LCS, like the same way we did with Dignitas and with Evil Geniuses, right? That's been some of the best moves that I think the LCS has done to bring those two organizations in. And I think that by removing the CLG spot, you open the league up to new and interesting possibilities. The question is, okay, well, who would take the spot of CLG left? Literally anybody with a pocketbook big enough. But the fact of the matter is there are a lot of organizations that would like to be part of the LCS that have the funding to do so. So the LCS can be very, very picky about the ones that it wants in. It can really sit down and look at a lot of these different orgs and say, okay, well, we only want the best of the best that we can get with top end sponsors, with organizations that have credible networks for their players, or large organizations that know what they're doing, and really kind of get down to the nitty gritty of what they would allow into the league. So I don't think that you would necessarily see any problems with a team with them trying to find a spot to fill, or a team to fill the spot in the league. That certainly I don't think would be a problem. And I would be interested to see what a new organization of that particular caliber, of a high enough caliber to be in the LCS to take over for CLG, what they would do, and the perspectives and the changes that they would bring along with them. You know, and maybe the potential players that they kind of uncover, or the rosters that they build, instead of recycling a lot of different players from different leagues like CLG has, which is maybe not fair to a couple other players. Like I know Broxa went, took a leap of faith to go out in CLG and wasn't necessarily rewarded for it. But the fact of the matter is he's a player from another region that's kind of bounced around teams a lot. And as much as I want to see him have a team for North America, I would like to see them foster more native talent, and I would like to see what a new organization does in that regard. Maybe they try really hard to get North American local grown talent, or bring in players that we haven't seen before, in order to add a fresh level of competition and new perspective on things. So that's really kind of the end of this video. I just want to talk about CLG. I want to kind of bring this as a food for thought thing, a topic for discussion. And I'd be interested to see what other people think about this one. So if you want to, just leave your comments down in the comment section below, and I'll kind of read through those and see what people think. But if you've gotten this far, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.